Hello! Welcome to my very first YouTube channel and video. It's technically not true. I've made YouTube channels and videos before, but they weren't good. This is the first actual attempt at making a YouTube video. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Hal, or of Coloring and Cosplay on Instagram, and for those of you who followed me over from Instagram, hi! Good to see you. That was really cheesy, but whatever, we're rolling with it. I finally got around to doing YouTube, and what better way to start it than with a video about what I think is my most important cosplay. It's definitely the one that has impacted me the most. It's the one I've spent the most time on, the most money on. And so it means a lot to me, and I've been working on it for a very long time, and it's been through a lot of iterations. So today I will be giving you the entire history and tour of my Rey cosplay. I recently decided to submit to the Rebel Legion, so this will be a two-part video where I will talk about, today I'm going to talk about my, the process of building my costume, and then after I hear back from the Rebel Legion, I will make a follow-up video about their comments, if I made it in, changes I need to make, things like that. Gotta get these glasses to stop reflecting. Maybe this is why YouTubers don't wear glasses. History time! I first discovered the 501st and by extension the Rebel Legion when I was about 10 years old. StarWars.com was like my life. So anyway, I loved the Rebel Legion, I loved the whole idea of it, and I wanted to join so badly, so I made a promise to myself that when I turned 18 I would join. 18 came and went, and then The Force Awakens came out, and from the moment I saw Rey, I know like the new movies are controversial and whatever, but for me, from the moment I saw Rey, I knew that she was like the female Jedi that little kid me always needed. Ahsoka was awesome. Ahsoka always like takes first place in my heart, but Ahsoka's costume is very hard to make, and I was very intimidated to do that. So I walked out of the theater in 2015 and was like, I'm gonna be Rey, I am Rey, I'm doing this, I am applying to the Rebel Legion. I mean, that was 5 years ago, so it took me 5 years to do, but we'll get to that. So I'm gonna put up a bunch of pictures for this video. So first up is the very first version of my costume. I think this is the oldest picture I have of this costume. On the left you can see the freshly sewn, yet to be dyed version of it. On the right is just after I finished dyeing it. The fabric I started with was very bright, and obviously Rey lives on Jakku. It's a desert planet, you have to dye the fabric so that it looks aged. And you'll see throughout these photos that the shirt, pants, and arm wraps and the tabards, the fabric drapes, will stay the same throughout the evolution of my costume. I'm really glad I got those right on the first try. I'm really glad I never had to remake them. I did make changes as time went on. I made a few alterations. I took seams in. I'll talk about that later. All in all, I'm just really glad I got it right on the first try. So the shirt and pants, look, I didn't look it up. So the shirt and the pants were made from the McCall's pattern M7421. It's their kind of bootleg Rey. I highly recommend that pattern if you're going to make it. It needs a couple tweaks. The biggest problem I ran into is that the pants didn't really have a defined front and back, which was a little weird for a pattern, so I had to take them in so that they had a front and a back. That was strange, but they work really well as the pants. For the tabards, the fabric drapes, I'm just going to keep calling them tabards for simplicity's sake. I just eyeballed those, same for the arm wraps, I just sewed them as one piece. I've seen some people take medical tape and dye those and then wrap them up the arm every time they wear the costume. I'm thinking about trying that out here soon, but for now I just sewed them as one piece. I made basically a sleeve, the individual strips, sewed them on so it looked like it was wrapped, dyed it, done. I made the wrist cuff from a piece of fake leather that I had lying around. I used a belt that I already had, and same for the boots. Those boots I used, they are Merrell water-resistant work boots that I had. They served the part really well at first, but as you'll see, they're far from screen accurate. They would work really well for a Last Jedi version of Rey, and I even think they would probably be up to Rebel Legion standards, but they're not right for the Scavenger Rey, they're too tall. So this photo, this is the first time that I wore the costume in public. You can see that it's still pretty rough. The shirt isn't quite the right color. I ended up going back and re-dyeing that since it wasn't dark enough. You can also see that the wraps are way too wide at the shoulders. That's a really important modification I made with later versions. I ended up sewing and gathering the tabards at the shoulders so that they stayed in place and weren't so wide. I know some people attach them to the actual shoulders of the shirt, but I didn't want to do that just in case I changed parts. Some people use snaps or Velcro to do that as well. And so yeah, that was pretty much the first full-ish, complete-ish version of my Rey costume. Version 2, alright, not too different from version 1, definitely a few important tweaks. You can see how I gathered the shoulders of the tabards like I mentioned, and I also have the second version of the arm cuff. This is also the first attempt at the full scavenger look, and I say full in massive air quotes because I really just added the goggles and the hood. This is the first version for both of those. The hood was a cheap long sleeve jersey t-shirt I found at the thrift store. The fabric was way too thin and clingy, and you can really see how it just kind of form fits my face, and you can see the outline of my mouth, and it was a little unsettling. I didn't like how that looked. So the goggles were made from dollar store sunglasses, felt, and pleather. And as rough as they look, I think this version actually looked better than my second version of the goggles that I ended up doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. This is the version of the costume that I actually joined a group with. I knew it wasn't anywhere near Rebel Legion standards at the time, but I ended up joining a volunteer group instead who didn't have anywhere near the strict standards of the Rebel Legion because they weren't Star Wars specific. I found the less strict costume standards appealing. In hindsight, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I'm a lot more particular about how my costumes look now. I did a lot of work with that group, and my costume continued to change throughout that. It was a fantastic experience, and I'll probably make a separate video about them at another time, but they essentially did similar things to the Rebel Legion, but on a much smaller scale, so like volunteer events, hospital visits, things like that. Version 3. Version 3, I think, is the largest overhaul of the costume I did. This is where I made the staff, finally, which is like my favorite prop that I've ever made, and I love it. I also upgraded the hood to a thicker fabric. It was also still made of a t-shirt. I just cut the cuffs off so that it had a raw look to it. It's a much thicker fabric that looks a lot more like the film version. And this is also version 2 of the goggles. I also finally got a new belt and a hip bag as well, which I'd been missing those previously. You'll also see the backpack in a few of these photos. It's the Loungefly Rey backpack that I got from Think Geek. The patches and stuff on it are definitely not screen accurate because it has like Star Wars branded stuff on it. I've been trying to figure out how to take those off, but one of them is like riveted on, so I don't want to rip the fabric trying to get it off. We went out to the beach and took some photos in the sand, and it's still my favorite photo shoot of all time, even though there's still like a couple things wrong technically screen accurately with this costume. And it just looked so much like Jakku. It was so cool. Now there's technically a version 2.5 between these versions because I did attempt to make Rey's belt on my own out of fake leather. It didn't work, the Velcro didn't stay, it didn't stay on, it looked really bad, but you can see it in this photo. It's not a significant enough change for me to consider it an entirely new version, but you can see the difference. So version 2 of the goggles were actually made from a Stormtrooper mask. I know some fans have speculated that Rey's goggles are made out of a Stormtrooper visor because they have the same shape the eye holes do. So I found a really flimsy, cheap kids Star Wars Stormtrooper helmet mask. Like, it wasn't a full helmet, it was just the front half of the mask. I cut out the eye parts to make the goggles, and then just glued fake leather and felt around that. I think the previous version, despite being a lot rougher and not as nice looking, was still better than the second version, because the problem I had with this version is that it laid really flat. The first version was curved to my face, so it looked more like a pair of goggles should. This one just sat really flat. It looked really weird. The staff, the coolest part of my costume. Alright, so before we move on to the next version, I want to talk about this. It's my favorite prop I've ever made. It looks so cool. I feel so awesome holding it. But anyway, it started its life as a 6-foot wooden dowel from Home Depot. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter, and it's heavy. Like, you could hurt someone with this. So after that, I bought a ton of craft foam and super glue and used PVC pipe and just started gluing details on it. I cut out every piece individually. I glued them on. After I glued all the details on, I spray painted it with one of those metallic spray paints. The paint already had a kind of weathered look to it, so I've never really weathered it formally. I would like to go back and do that at some point just to make it look scratched and dented and used. After that, I took some cotton jersey fabric that I had lying around. I just cut it into a long strip and dyed it with coffee. Then I used fake leather and some hooks to put the strap on, and that was pretty much it. It came out fantastic, and it probably cost me under $30 to make, largely because I had a lot of pieces already. But even then, the wooden dowel didn't cost a whole lot. Craft foam's pretty cheap. Probably the spray paint was the most expensive thing. Because it's foam, the details are pretty susceptible to damage, so it's gotten some dents and chips over the years, but I've just been able to touch that up with more spray paint, and it's been great. So version 4 comes with 2 major changes. Yet another pair of goggles and a new belt. So the goggles I found on Amazon, they're a resin replica and they totally look the part. They even have the little light on the side that supposedly works. I got the LED to work, but it seems like no matter what kind of button batteries or how many I put in the little chamber, it doesn't want to light up. The LED is also red, so I have a box of LEDs around here. I'll probably just replace it eventually with a different one. The belt I also found on Amazon. I bought it by itself. It had the option to buy it with the bag, but I just bought the belt because I already had the bag, and the bag I have works the part just fine. So not a whole lot of changes to this version, but definitely some really important ones. And last but not least, version 5. This is the current one that I have right now. The biggest change here is the boots. I found a lightly used pair of the Pozu boots. Those are the screen accurate ones that you see Rey actually wearing in the movie. And the ones that I got were actually the boots that they produced before The Force Awakens came out, because after The Force Awakens came out, they stopped making that line and made Star Wars specific branded ones. I know this caused a little bit of a panic in the Rebel Legion Rey community because they were like, hey, the screen accurate boots now have Star Wars branding all over them. Are they not screen accurate anymore? And the Rebel Legion was like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. They also jacked the price up after that because branding. So anyway, I got these boots for about $125 on eBay. Definitely the most expensive part of the costume, but definitely the most worth it. They're super comfortable. I wore them to a convention all day and they were fantastic. They also just bring the whole look together and make it look so perfect, and I love it. Now, I didn't mention this before because I don't actually have any pictures of it, but somewhere between like versions 2 and 3, I tried making Rey's boots to spectacular failure. I had this old pair of boots that I got years ago for like $15, $20 at Ross, I think. They started out as like this hideous beige color, and they've been, what have they been? I think I painted them black for a Loki costume, which was the first costume I ever wore to a convention. And then I painted them again for something else. And then when I started making the Rey boots, they were knee-high, so I cut them off at the ankle, and then I bought this fabric at Joann's that had that kind of textured look that Rey's boots do, and attempted to kind of cover them and put the straps on them, and they were terrible, and they didn't stay on, so they went away. So here is the picture that I sent into the Rebel Legion, just kind of a really boring front, side, back, showing all of the details of the costume. And that's where we are with Rey right now. So I'll make a part 2 to this video once I hear back from the Rebel Legion. Like I said before, I'm really curious to see what feedback they have for me. I'm reasonably sure, I'm actually like 95% sure I'm not going to get in on the first try. There's definitely a few tweaks that could be made, but I just haven't spotted them myself. So once I get their feedback, I'll make another video talking about the feedback that they gave me, my plans to fix it, and maybe make another video after that once I get in. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited to start this kind of cosplay YouTube thing. I'd like to do some other videos as well. If there's anything you'd like to see, go ahead and drop something in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I think in the future I'd like to do maybe some video essays, some reviews. I did used to be a film major, so I might as well put that to good use and talk about some movies. Definitely more cosplay. I'm really bad at taking progress photos and videos of things, so I'm hoping that starting this will help me remember to do that so I can put together tutorials of how I make things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I have a very bad recording setup today. I will fix this in the future, but I knew if I didn't do this today, I was probably never going to do it ever. I need to stop doing this. It's the YouTuber clap. Help me. Also, my glasses keep reflecting the ring light, which is something I will troubleshoot later, or wear contacts. Alright. I also need to remember to not look at the screen, but to look at the viewfinder. Look at you. That was creepy.